As always, we will begin with 3 deep breaths. So take a deep breath in through your nose, softly out of your mouth, in again through your nose, softly out of your mouth. Last one, deeply in and softly out. Today's topic is going to be 2 pieces. I'm going to share about my experience with religion and spirituality, and then I am also going to talk about why I think people are turning to religion again, or rather even like what are you actually searching for when you're searching for quote unquote Jesus? So this conversation is brought up from, if you follow me on other platforms, on social media, on TikTok and on Instagram, you've seen a video, and this was brought up because I have been seeing much more recently, like yes, the last few years, but like the last few weeks, I have seen so many more people that I've followed for years, people that were just, some people were in the spirituality realm, some people weren't, all of a sudden being like, I've been baptized, I'm going back to the church, I've been called to devote my life to Jesus. And I'm like, basically the video I made, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is happening? Now, I do remember this years ago. There were a bunch of astrologers who spoke about the year 2026 being the year where we were going to see a lot of people fall off the spirituality bandwagon. Let me pause here, actually. We'll take a deep breath in and take a deep breath out. For those of you that are listening, that this could be a trigger topic for some people. Maybe it's not a trigger topic immediately, but that it brings something up within you. Obviously you guys are listening to this, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, but you're listening to this on a platform where you can pause this, but I really want to invite you, if you decide to pause this and reflect, to come back to the rest of the conversation. I also really want to invite you, no matter what platform you're listening to this on, to please leave a comment below. Tell me what your thoughts are, what resonated, what doesn't resonate, what has been your journey with religion, organized religion, and spirituality. What have you been seeing on social media? Because I think before I really get into the juice of this conversation, I think that's an important piece to hit upon, especially, I was raised Catholic. There is so much wounding that there are a lot of people in spirituality who have wounding from organized religions, wounding, trauma. So just want to preface that. Okay, so yes, the astrologers talking about 2026. I want to bring it back to the point that I was at. And they were talking, they didn't say anything about religion, but they were just like, we are going to see a bunch of people who began to get into spirituality just based off of it's trendy, it's exciting to get into. Before COVID, people were into spirituality. Obviously, I'm going to tell you about my life story in a moment, but I already was. But then when we saw COVID happen, the uptick in people that wanted to understand what yoga truly was, do meditation, sit with plant medicine, people that also began businesses, during that time. I had already started my business prior to COVID. I began my business in the 2018, 2019 era. But I was still obviously very new in 2020 when we had COVID and lockdown. So it's interesting for me to think back to that. And there were some people on TikTok that commented and were like, yes, astrologically, they listed out a few things of why it could be what it is. If you know astrology, please leave a comment below. Someone even brought up the year itself in terms of human design. So if you know stuff about human design, please comment on this platform and let us know what your reflection is to that. So it seems like there's a lot of things pointing to this idea of people that began spirituality or were just called to spirituality that maybe, because I don't want it to come across as me, I'm not trying to be mean, or it have like a mean sentiment behind it, but it is interesting to hear and see that, okay, maybe these people weren't into spirituality because they were actually into spirituality. They were just looking for escapism. When it comes to, if you've never listened to this podcast before, then like maybe this is your first time hearing me say this, but when it comes to plant medicine and spirituality, it can be so much escapism for people. It can be just another gateway to remove themselves from having to deal with themselves, having to deal with others. You know, the love and light community in spirituality is a real thing, and people fall into that all of the time. So let's take another deep breath and breathe out. Okay, so now my story and my relationship to organized religion and spirituality. Truthfully, they're one and the same, but I was raised by my mother and father Catholic, so I'm baptized, First Holy Communion, confirmation. I'm going to do this simultaneously at the same time. So that is a religion piece. On a spirituality front, my parents recognized that it must have been, I think they said I was either 3 or 4. I could speak with those beyond the veil. So I could speak to dead people. My mom noticed that I was having like full-blown conversations, not just like a child that's babbling on, but rather a child that's responding to questions or statements. And then I would have a response to it. And then she would hear silence. And then in her mind, she was like, you then responded again as if somebody responded to what you had said. There's a photo on the altar. Obviously, I'm sitting in the living room today, but the altar's right over there. And my Uncle Kenny is the first person that my parents really realized like I was able to talk to. And then there were other deceased, their grandparents that I was able to talk to because I could literally describe these people in depth to them. My mom, something that she's always shared with me is how I would get, upset if there wasn't space for these people at a table or at a seat or like, in a place. So for me, I think that my parents baptized me and then your first Holy Communion, you're in like 2nd grade. So you're what? 7 or 8 years old. All I remember as a child was that I was so excited that I was getting a party, right? Because on Staten Island, it was very common for your parents to throw you a party for your first Holy Communion. I got a party at a restaurant. There was music. I got to get my hair done. My grandmother bought me this like beautiful poofy white dress. So there was no piece of me that was against the idea because I thought that's just what you did. I think it's also really important to note that where I grew up on Staten Island, most of the kids I went to school with and people that I was friends with, played music with, played sports with, my parents, friends, children, we all were Catholic. Whether we were Italian American Catholic, Irish American Catholic, Filipino American Catholic, African American Catholic, like everyone did the same thing. So again, to me, there wasn't too much difference. Even the other friends that I had, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that wasn't raised with some type of religion. My friends that were not Catholic or Christian in some other denomination were Jewish. Or were Muslim, so like they all had their own things that they did, even though I didn't know exactly what they were doing because that was not how I was raised. I knew that they still had things they had to do because that is just what happened. So I wasn't really exposed to the idea of not having religion when I was a child. So by the time I was in middle school was really when I was doing a lot of astral projection, lucid dreaming. I was working in my dream state. My father was a pretty big piece of that puzzle for me as he was interested in this stuff, but couldn't necessarily access those things. So he was very interested to talk to me about these things. The only thing Yeah, the thing. Hello, there's always a thing. My parents didn't have the verbiage to explain to me what was happening to me. So when I would explain to my mom, there's two types of astral projection. I mean, there's probably infinite amounts of astral projection, but for the sake of this conversation, two types of astral projection. One type of astral projection is when you can literally move a different, like your energy body around your house, and you can literally peel yourself up out of your body. And you look down and you go, okay, that's my physical body. Now I'm going to go walk around the house. The other one is when you're traveling to different dimensions, realms, channels, whatever you want to call it. And I was able to do both, but I would always tell my mom in the morning, especially after I would walk down I would walk around the house. I would tell her in the morning about, last night and I went into the basement and it was the middle of the night, and she would be like, it's literally not possible. You were just dreaming. My parents they didn't have that verbiage to support me. And that's okay. They did their best within the limits that they had. So in middle school is when I received my not first Holy Communion. Hello, that was second grade. Your confirmation. And you are confirmed. And again, I did not question anything. It was everybody else. It was what they were doing. And now I want to bring it back a little bit. In fourth grade, I chose to become an altar server. As much as my parents raised me Catholic, I love them so much, but they were not religious people. They went to church every single weekend, and of course, when there were quote unquote more important masses, they went to those as well for holidays and high holy days. But they were not deeply into the church, and they didn't do things outside of mass. Like my mom never prayed the rosary. There was no reading the Bible. I had a children's Bible, and it was I want to say it was a Precious Moments, if you know that brand, children's Bible. And it was pink on the outside and it had leather on the outside. And I read that quite a few times before I ended up getting rid of it. When I, was like, religion, I'm so angry about it. But I read that children's Bible quite a few times. That is a recommendation that I give to people. If you're looking to read the Bible, I highly recommend two things when it comes to reading the Bible. One, either read a children's Bible, so it's easy to digest, or read the Bible in terms of a very dramatic fiction. It's such a good book. It's a crazy fucking book if you read it in terms of a fiction drama. Yeah, and we can talk about my ideology when it comes to what I think sacred texts really are. But so in fourth grade, I became an altar server. I told my parents, I want to be an altar server. I think because I was able to speak with the dead so easily, churches felt like a safer place for me. I could see a lot more dead people inside of a church than I could say. I don't ever remember seeing dead people while I was at school as a kid. I don't remember, there were dead people in my house growing up, but never a bunch of them. Whereas at church, there were a bunch of them and it just felt safe. Which also makes sense because growing up in the Catholic Church, I think, in my opinion, the Catholic Church is very ritualistic. Very, very much so. They have lots of rituals. And if you've ever been to a high holy mass, they will frankincense the fuck out of that church. So in certain ways, the church, it was a holy place. There were lots of prayers happening there all the time, and there was cleansing happening. So I felt comfortable going to church. I enjoyed going to mass as a child. So I became an altar server in fourth grade. And then I started doing child lectoring. The lector is the person that reads. And I love public speaking. Shout out to the people who have been following my social media journey since 2019, and for years we're you should make a podcast, and we're really the reason why in 2023 this podcast was birthed. So thank you again to those of you. I love to talk shit. I love a platform where I can just speak. So child lecturing, and then I joined the youth group while I was still in middle school, and then I got confirmed. That's the other piece, is like I had friends at church. I was an altar server, I was a child lector, so like I had friends to go see. So also in a way, I liked going to mass because I had a job to do. It wasn't like kids would be like, oh my God, you just go and you sit there and you listen for an hour. And I'm like, I don't sit for the hour. I have things I have to do. And before mass, you get to, get dressed with your friends, and afterwards you can talk to everybody. Like, I don't know, there was just something, I guess for me, there's also that sense of community. I really love talking. I really love having community around. I really love being able to listen to other people's thoughts as well. So I joined youth group at my church, and my confirmation name that I chose, for those of you that are like deep in the divine feminine lineage, I chose the name Sophia. For those of you that don't know, there's a book, it's called The Sophia Codes. The Sophia lineage is probably one of the more popular divine feminine lineages that we hear about, especially on social media. Very like Gnostic texts, Gnostic rituals, Gnostic thought process. So related to religion, but also not rooted in religion. So it's interesting because I forget the person who confirmed me, but I'll never forget the way he said my name, my confirmation name, that is. It's interesting because most of this is the, South Shore of Staten Island, Italian Americans mostly in this Catholic church, all the Marias and the Catherines and the Anne, which I have a grandmother Anne and a grandmother Catherine. Just like most of the people that I was confirmed with all had the same name. And I felt so fucking cool about myself for no reason, other than the fact that I chose the name Sophia. And the way he said my confirmation name, he was like, Sophia. I won't forget that either. And my cousin Kristen was my sponsor. And yeah, I didn't recognize how important that name was until a few years later on when I really started diving deep. And it wasn't really a few years later on. It was once I was in college. So like, I was 12 when I got confirmed, maybe 13. And it wasn't until 19-ish when I was really like, wow, the name Sophia is so powerful. And I actually wrote a post about that on social media last year where it's like, of course I chose that name not even knowing. It was just Saint Sophia, and what she stood for spoke to me at the time. That's what they tell you to do. They're like, look into the saints, choose the one that speaks to you, yada yada, and you go on with your day. Then I got into high school. When I was in high school, I had already been altar serving for a few years. I had been doing stuff with the youth group. I had been child lecturing. At this point was when I got to witness my grandfather, Ken, pass away. He was on hospice, and for some reason, my parents were open to the idea of me watching his body decay. And I don't say that in a bad way. I just say it in, I don't think it's neither good nor bad. I think it just is what it is. It's what my parents chose for me. I asked to witness his death, and they said, okay, sure, you want to be around him more. And now granted, I was also very close with him. So they were like, we know this is a hard loss for you. But I really think that was one of my first larger initiations into understanding the spirit realm in a different way. So you have to think, up until 14, 15, I'd been talking to the dead. I had been to some wakes and stuff like that. But I had never lost someone in my own family. I had never really been to like a full funeral at this point. So it's also important to note that when I was 14 and began high school, I started drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana and salvia, and doing psilocybin mushrooms by myself or with like a few other friends in the middle of the woods, right? I had been playing guitar at that point since, I was in elementary school, and bass. So like music and, quote unquote, like punk music and rock and roll, like all of that stuff was already in my orbit and in my mind. So as I was watching my grandfather die, I don't know how high I was. I don't know what substances I had been taking exactly through those 3 weeks, because he passed after 3 weeks on hospice. But it's important to note that I had also kind of existed in this world where I was taking substances and my frontal lobe was not completely developed. So I watched my grandfather die. I can vividly in my mind remember and see, and I can almost smell my grandfather's last rites. So in the Catholic Church, when someone is passing away, you can get them their last rites, right? So we talked about in the beginning, there's this baptism, communion, confirmation. Obviously, marriage is also one of the sacraments that you can go through, and you can get your last rites. Obviously, I feel like the name kind of speaks for it themselves. My grandmother Anne was very, very religious, very, very fucking Catholic. Anytime I slept at my grandmother Anne or my grandfather Kenny's house, she was up 3 a.m. doing rounds of her rosary. And she would do them for a while. I don't know how many rounds she was doing, but she was fucking doing them. And so while my grandfather was dying, there was already a lot of prayer, and a lot of people from their parish, their church that they specifically went to, not like the Catholic Church overarching, meaning their parish, the one they belonged to, quote unquote belonged to. It's the one they went to every week. Well, she was there every day, but nonetheless, people were coming through. So there was also this spiritual energy of a lot of prayers, a lot of cleansing, a lot of other Catholic rituals that they were doing for my grandfather, as he was quite literally, like, when I was young and I watched him pass, I felt like he was just losing his mind. And now I just look at it as like, it was just pieces of him that were slowly going over those 3 weeks, which 3 weeks is a short amount of time, but also for a 14, 15-year-old, it felt like it was an eternity of watching him forget people, forget himself, think he's talking to someone different, think that he's falling, all those things. And that obviously sparked my fascination with working with the dying and death doulaing and all that. But he passed away, and I started to experience panic attacks because at that point I had only, they spoke about it in the church, and in the Catholic Church specifically. I hope you guys are following along. I'm trying to do this in I don't want to just tell you my story and then give you my thoughts. I'm trying to give the story and the thoughts at the same time. So I hope this is supportive. But in the church, we have so many different pieces that overlap with spirituality. Specifically, I can really only speak to the Catholic Church. So in the Catholic Church, they teach you that heaven and hell are metaphysical places. When I work with people on psychic development, obviously I'm also talking about the spirit realm in a metaphysical sense. I just learned, I don't know how many of you are on Rapture TikTok. If you don't already know this about me, I am a TikTok slut. I love that platform. But basically, there's a bunch of Christians who really were convinced that the rapture was coming. In the Catholic Church, I was never taught about the rapture. The rapture was never spoken about. There's the idea of the second coming of Jesus. But these fucking people on TikTok, if you don't have TikTok and you don't know what rapture talk is, I implore you in this moment to pause this fucking video. Google rapture TikTok and just watch some of these videos, because these people really thought that Jesus was coming down to lift them up out of the air. Literally, that's how it goes, as a balloon flying in the sky. And that again speaks to a deeper sense of religious trauma that people go through. And that was one of the things when I was first seeing all these videos, I'm like, oh my God, this is hysterical. And then the more I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh my God, this is actually terrifying. To have people so fucking brainwashed within Christianity that they're saying things to their kids I've devoted my life to Jesus. He's probably not going to come for you, but he's definitely going to come for me. Or telling them you are going to be brought too. So we're all dying tomorrow, but it's also not dying. Now I also understand where flat earthers come from. I never really understood that idea, but now that I know that some Christians believe that heaven is literally above the sky, which is confusing to me because space, but that's neither here nor there in this conversation. And then they also believe that hell is like inside of the earth, like it's literally below our feet. I've learned so much about people that are like other denominations of Christian within these last few weeks. It's been incredible. But in Catholicism, we learn that it is a metaphysical place. When I teach, and people want to connect with the other side, some of the things that I say is like, first off, I think heaven is on earth. There are some sunsets and sunrises and some places that I've seen on earth where I'm like, how could this not be heaven? Like, the earth is an incredible fucking place. But with that being said, I teach that heaven, purgatory, and hell are really a state of mind when someone passes over into the spirit realm. You can keep yourself in the idea of hell if you believe that you are a horrible person, that you can never make up for anything that you've done. Like, if you truly believe those things, when you pass on, you can keep yourself in that or a purgatory mindset and space. I will say, and I always say this to anybody that I'm working with, I would say 90 to 95% of people that pass, and then I'm able to connect with them after they've passed, they just have like a bird's eye view of life and everything that happened. So most of them have a very heaven mindset. Sometimes at first they have a purgatory or hell mindset, as they're like, oh my goodness, that's what I did to people that I love while I was on earth. And then, you know, I'm working with them kind of sometimes to move past it. It depends on how what capacity I'm working with this deceased person. Are they a deceased person of a client of mine or something else? But at this point, I started having panic attacks because it really dawned on me, like, holy shit, at this point, I was connecting to dead people that I had never met on this planet. I've never met my Uncle Kenny. If there's any person I would give my life up for to spend 5 minutes with in person, it would be my Uncle Kenny. I would love to feel his arms around me in a hug, like really physically, because I've felt him metaphysically from childhood, like deep childhood, you know? And I just wish I could. But alas, in this moment when my grandfather passed, I was like, holy shit, so all these people I love and myself, we're all gonna pass, and then we're all gonna go into the spirit realm. So I was having some panic attacks, anxiety, lots of existential dread about it, and I started going to therapy. And my therapist, I swear, she was hand sculpted and made for me. And she was like, this is what we're gonna do. Not only are you gonna be coming here every week, you're gonna start going to yoga asana classes. You're gonna go to breathwork circles. You're gonna go to sound healings. And although I had already done yoga asana, prior to meeting her, it wasn't like a devoted multiple times a week, go to the same teachers, really start to learn the yogic teachings. It was just what most people get into. I shouldn't say most, but many people in the Western world get into yoga as a workout or stretching. And that was what it was for me. Like, as a kid, like, I mean, I knew what Om meant. I knew it was the sound that created the universe. You know, I knew that meditation, I knew what it was, obviously, because I was astral projecting and stuff like that. But I didn't really understand the technology of the yogic traditions until my therapist was like, no, you're not going even once a week. You're going multiple times a week. And that really started my deeper journey into understanding like that I could soothe my own body internally. Also, let's bring it back even further. When I was in, again, here we go. When I was in elementary school, I used to do these things called storytelling contests, where you would memorize a story and you would get up on stage, and all these kids, we would all tell different stories, and you would have to be animated, and you couldn't get dressed or anything, right? Like, you couldn't like act a part, but you were just a storyteller. And in 3rd grade and 4th grade, I came in 2nd place. And then in 5th grade, I came in first place. And I was so excited and proud of myself. That began my journey with folk magic and paganism. So when I got into middle school, a lot of the books that I read in middle school, besides the like regular books that we were all reading around those times that were like popular, I read a lot of folk tales, and a lot of folk magic is sprinkled throughout folk tales, and a lot of pagan rituals and ceremonies are sprinkled throughout these books. So by the time I got into high school, prior to my grandfather dying, but after I was smoking marijuana and taking psilocybin mushrooms, I was also doing these rituals to connect with the earth and the trees and the water, because I knew that they existed. I knew what candle magic was and divination and all this stuff. So once I really had that devoted moment with the yogic tradition throughout high school, I feel like that really changed everything for me. And I want to say that's the beginning of my sophomore year of high school. So for the rest of my high school years, I was very devoted to going to healings and all different types of things throughout spirituality, alongside the fact that I then became youth group president when I was my junior and senior year of high school. So I am very grateful for the specific parish that I grew up in. In that parish, I was able to bring things to the youth group. I was able to bring things to the priests and the deacons and other people that were in the parish to say, like, because when I first started reading the Bhagavad Gita when I was in high school, I'm like, okay, so do all religious texts say the same thing? Take a moment, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. If you have not taken the time to read religious texts, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And for those of you that are listening to this podcast episode, if I ever get the opportunity to go back to school, I've been saying it for years, I would love to go back to school for religion. Like, reading religious texts and just seeing that, like, why are they all fighting to say the same thing? You're all fighting to say the same fucking thing. Is very interesting. And also, I already had reading a lot of folk magic and folklores through, like, pagan views, very, like, the Celts and, like, the Mediterranean, the Norse pagans and things like that. So I was lucky that when I was in high school, I at least had the opportunity to say in the church. Although, yes, of course, there were some people that were like, you can read all of those, but, like, Jesus is truly, like, number one, and, like, this is why, like, we're Catholic, and, we follow, Jesus's teachings, and blah, 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 blah. But I was also very grateful that there was a priest, his name was Father Alan Travers, and a lot of people at the church I was at did not like him, and he was, like, kind of a dick. So I do understand that. He had very dickish ways. He was very strict, and he very much so did things the way he wanted to fucking do them, which, when you're serving a community of people, sometimes people would like you to be a little bit more open, a little bit more friendly, what have you. But he was great with me. And I got the opportunity to really, like, ask him some questions over the years that I was very, very grateful for. And that he was, when I would say, I'm just wondering why, in the Vedas, in the Vedic texts, which is, again, from, like, the Hindu traditions, it says this, and I was reading this, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, right? And it says this, and then when you go to the Bible, it says this, and I'm, like, questioning life and beyond life, and he's like, I think you should keep questioning it. And I would go to him being like, what is the answer to, insert random question, and he'd be like, I think you should just keep reading. I think you should just keep thinking. I think you should just keep meditating. I think you should just keep coming to Mass and being at Mass and listening to what we're saying in our homilies. The homily is, like, basically, if you've never been to Catholic Mass, they read some scriptures, and then the priest, basically, it's the idea of, if you've ever been to Dylan's group integrations, where Dylan shares a story and then shares a teaching about it, like, most of the time, the priests try to keep the homily, they try to keep the theme with what's being read in the sacred text prior that day. Whereas Dylan just kind of pulls out whatever the fuck he wants to talk about, but that's really what it is. And he would say, like, keep listening to what we're saying, like, just keep thinking more. And at the time, I know it really aggravated me because I was just looking for more answers. I was still young and in high school and so anxious to understand the other side, meaning like, this is Earth. What the fuck is going on when I die? I just want to know. Existential dread and I are like frenemies, best friends and enemies and lovers, all the things. So I'm very thankful for that. At that time, also, by the end of high school, I was also the cantor at Mass. Not every single Mass, but most Mass that weekend, most of the weekends, which is the singer. So I did go to college originally for music, and that's a whole different podcast episode if you want to hear about my journey with music and the voice and the womb and needing to leave school for multiple surgeries and blah, 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 blah. But I still carry a lot of those hymns and songs with me. Now, I do tend to change the words. If you've ever came to one of my cacao ceremonies, whether in person or virtual, you'll hear my version of the Hail Mary. One of my favorite hymns is I Saw Water Flowing. I think it's so beautiful. I love the words. I love to listen to somebody play the organ. I miss listening to someone play the organ. But as I got older and I would use my Shruti box and my drum, and I did change the words to that hymn as well. And instead of, I think it's Hallelujah, I took those out and filled all of them with J-Mas. So I am very lucky that I had so many different avenues to explore. The yogic traditions, the Hindu pantheon is something that, and I just watched another video and someone debate about Hinduism being a religion or just a tradition that you can follow. I follow it as just a tradition. I don't follow it as an organized religion, but I also understand that there are some people that are like, this is what my family has always been devoted to, and this is our religion, you know? So I don't have a hand in that pot, so I can't really speak deeper to those practices. Let's take a deep breath in and out. When I was in college, for those of you that don't know, while I was in high school and doing all of those things, I also actively developed a cocaine addiction that I carried into college. And which is so funny to think about some of the things that I've done while on substances, you know, like the idea of like taking psilocybin mushrooms and then working a whole weekend, like at every single Mass at the church for like, I don't know, like name any nonprofit. And there I am after every Mass talking to the people that are coming up to me, thinking about the idea of how many lines of cocaine I've ripped and then went to yoga classes or a sound healing is like absolutely bonkers to me. But in college was when I really started to be like, what the fuck is even organized religion? I did have some issues in the church. When I was in the youth group, there was an issue that happened where I was very outspoken about abortion. Another one where I was very outspoken about the LGBTQ plus community. There were things that, although I was a part of the church, I was very much so like, I don't fuck with this. And I think that's what Father Travers really appreciated about me. And I didn't understand it until I got older, was that he was like, she pushes people's buttons. She makes people think about stuff. Like, I may not agree with what the kid's saying, but she has her own fucking mind. And that is what Jesus, Yeshua, and his teachings are all about. Yeshua is the Hebrew name for Jesus. But when I was in college was when I really deepened my devotion to the yogic tradition, when I deepened my relationship with earth wisdom, and I did a lot of earth medicine, psychedelic plant medicine trainings. I was like 19, 20, 21, and I just really got angry at organized religion for forgetting those pieces, for organized religion trying to convince me that, and this is how I felt personally, was that it was trying to convince me of something that I did not feel connected to. It was this idea that like, you have to follow one specific thing and that's going to be the thing that's quote unquote right. And that was what I would always really appreciated about when I started going to Buddhist temples and I started going to more Hindu temples and Hindu pujas and sadhanas, you know, and I started spending more time at ashrams in the States, was that they were like, yo, we don't really care as long as you're like devoted to what you're fucking doing. You could fall off the wagon tomorrow. And of course, like, you know, especially when you're at an ashram, they're like, but Krishna loves you, boo. Krishna will help you. Krishna will get you back here. Don't you worry. And that does sometimes, I see, it didn't bother me, but I've seen it in others really bother them because it reminds them or re-triggers them about organized religion. There was literally a teacher from India that was visiting near our home a little over a year ago. And one of our friends came with us for satsang, and the next day she was like, what the fuck was that? Like, why was he so rigid? Why was he so strict? Like, he made me feel bad for not being vegetarian. And then he was also like saying all this other stuff. And I was like, girly pop, because he's basically a priest. They all come in different flavors, but like, that is what it is. But I was able to detach myself from what that teacher was saying and be like, I've spent time in ashrams. I know how like deeply traditional teachers are. They want you to see, you know, so deeply. But again, you can go in and out of those spaces and there's no like, you need to repent for your sins. You're not going to get into heaven. There's none of that. What felt like to me was bullshit when I was in the Catholic Church. Like, okay, what if I don't want to come to church for a few years? Oh, well, you're going to have to go to confession. You're going to have to confess to the priest. You're going to have to ask for forgiveness. Bitch, maybe I just didn't want to fucking be here. Maybe I was having some mental health issues and I was addicted to cocaine for a few years, that is exactly what it was for me. I have not found my way back to organized religion, and I don't think I ever will. I do find myself in churches, though. Oh, I am a slut for going to a beautiful fucking church. I mean, they're holy places of worship. Even if there's trauma energy in there as well, there's also beautiful, incredible energy. You know, there are people that are praying for the healing of humanity and the planet all over the world at any given point in time. So I do find myself still randomly going to mass or randomly going. I will not take the Eucharist. I won't take the wafer that they give people in the Catholic Church because I don't identify myself as Catholic. But I still let the record show to the Italian Americans, they're going to know immediately. A saint that I talk to more than I could have ever imagined, St. Anthony. I lose the keys. I'm like, St. Anthony, where'd they go? I lose a spoon. St. Anthony, I can't find it. You know, I still call upon saints. And like, this is also something that I've been sharing with people when they're like, I feel like I need to go back to the church and Jesus. I'm like, you know, you can work with like Italian folk magic or Catholic folk magic. Like, Catholic folk magic is a regular thing. Now, for those of you that don't know, live in South America. I live in Peru. These bitches in Peru, they love white Jesus. They love white Jesus. South America was colonized by Spain. Spain loves white Jesus. Hello. So they're super Catholic over there. So most of South America is super duper fucking Catholic. Side note, recently I had 2 Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door. I've lived in Peru for 2 years now, like consecutively for 2 years. I felt like I made it. I didn't even know we had Jehovah's Witnesses here. They're like a few towns over from me. They were so nice. They complimented me on my Spanish. I was like, oh my goodness. I might join your cult. You're giving me a lot. They complimented like my house and the way my hair looked, my Spanish. They thought my dog and my cat were so cute. I was like, I would get suckered into a cult if they gave me enough compliments. That is what we've learned today. But most of the country, at least here in Peru, is very Catholic. So I do find myself wanting to be at certain things just to see the devotion again. One of the things that I think is absolutely beautiful. So Torchayo is the name for Jesus. And there's, I believe I don't know the name of it, but at Easter, these motherfuckers, they bring their own wooden cross and they hike up these mountains. I live in the Andes Mountains of Peru. Do you know how steep these mountains are? I'm fucking gasping for air when I go to walk the dog just down the road and back up. And these bitches, they start before the sun rises and they walk in silence and they bring the fucking cross up to a beautiful place on the mountain to place it there. And I'm like, whoa, that is devotion if I've ever seen it or heard it. So I do find myself going to those places, but what I know now, after years of plant medicine, years of earth wisdom and earth worship, just have faith in something. So the people that have been questioning, do I need to go back to the church? Why should I go back to the church? Everyone's different, but there are a few things that I've been saying over and over and over again. First off, the teachings of the church are white Jesus. They're whitewashed, colonized, patriarchal versions of Jesus. If you've never read the book, The Yoga of Jesus, I highly recommend it. Jesus was a radical hippie who probably smelled worse than every person at Burning Man, who was a Jewish man, who was Palestinian. That man spent his time with people that were oppressed. That was Jesus's whole fucking thing, was supporting the oppressed people. Take a deep breath in. Jesus's teachings are incredible. He was like, the kingdom of God is within you. And somehow these motherfuckers said, oh my God, the kingdom is outside of ourselves. That's literally not what he said. The kingdom of God is within you. And it's not just within him. He thinks it's within everyone. He said, let me call you my brothers and my sisters because we are all one. Jesus going around and talking to people is just basically one long ayahuasca journey. If you've ever sat with ayahuasca and you've had those ceremonies where you're just like, holy shit, we're all a piece of each other in some way, shape, or form. That is what Jesus was trying to teach people. That is what the teachings of Yeshua are rooted in. They are rooted in the healing hands. The healing hands. He didn't think he was the only one that had healing hands. He knew that we all had healing hands. Like, he knew that everyone on this planet was loved by a greater power. And he was like, I am a child of God. We are a child of God. He wasn't saying I am the only child of God. He was saying we are the children of God. And here's what I always say is like, whatever you have faith in, God, Krishna, Jah, Great Spirit, the earth outside, if you only have faith in yourself and you're an atheist, you just have to have faith in something. That's what Jesus's teachings were all about, was to have faith and be devoted to the oneness, understand the oneness, take the oneness inside of you. That sounded sexual, and I recognized that as soon as it came out of my mouth. My bad. That was not what I meant. You understand what I meant, but that wasn't what I meant. So there's a few other reasons that I think are just actually like factual as to why people are turning back to organized religion. One, the Christian nationalism movement that's happening within the United States of America right now is absolutely batshit and out of control. But there are people that fall easily into cults, right? And I would fall easily into a cult if you gave me enough compliments. Okay, so I'm not judging, just recognizing. So there's issues with the Christian nationalism movement happening within the States. You've also got what feels like the world being on fire. We, with our phones, have access to so many things. We can see what's going on in Palestine. We could see what was happening with those Israeli hostages. We can see, or at least hear, people talk about what's going on in Sudan and the Congo. We can hear about what's going on with child trafficking, human trafficking in general. We can hear about all of these insane things that are extremely overwhelming. And when life feels too overwhelming, what do we need? Faith. We need something that's going to make us feel like, no, it's going to be okay. We're humans. We're fragile. That is the fact of the matter. We are fragile little fucks. We're beautiful. Human beings are great. And we're fragile little fucks. It is what it is. You can be both. We are both. Human life is complex. It's so funny. When I do always speak with the other side, that's usually one of the number one things I've learned is that, like, dead people are like, it's literally not that big of a deal, but I understand that like human life, like you guys like make everything really complex. So we've got all of these things that we're able to see. There are a lot of people losing jobs, or you know, a lot of things being shut down in a lot of places, a lot of rights being taken away. Like all of these things add to people feeling like, oh my God, we're drowning and I need to be connected to something. So there's that piece of the puzzle. I also think that people don't want to take accountability. Something that I find when it comes to organized religion, if you're deep in spirituality, you know that it's gonna fucking suck. It does, because you have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to say, oh my God, I have to take responsibility for that. I am the reason that this happened, or I can grow from this experience. Whereas religion, you know, I remember when my father had an affair and was not good at hiding it. And so there was someone at the time who said something along the lines to me of like, you know, I've really been praying for your father, that like the devil leaves his soul so that like, you know, he can go back to your, at this point in time, you know, things were very here nor there. I don't want my parents together, let the record show, but they were like, you know, so that like your father can go back to your mother and come back home to you guys, you know, like he'll make it right. I'm just like really praying that like Jesus supports him in seeing that. And I was like, I really appreciate the sentiment, and never ever say that to my father. Never ever say that to anybody else, because he's already not taking responsibility for the fact that he's having an affair. And what you just reminded me is Christianity, the whole, right, most of the time, underneath that umbrella is there's this idea of like, oh my God, you did something bad. Yeah, the devil was within you. That was the devil's work. The devil was trying to take you over. And I was like, don't give him that excuse. Let him look himself in the fucking mirror and say, I made a massive mistake. But alas, that has not happened. Is what it is. So yes, I see that is often something people that are deep within organized religion, they don't like to take responsibility for their own actions and thoughts. There's always a Bible verse that they can give you, you know? And the other piece of this is discipline. And I say this after staying, if you've never stood in an ashram, it's an incredible experience. I highly recommend it. There's something that you will really learn about yourself. When you do stay at an ashram though, it's very strict. You know, your wake up bell, at least where I've stayed, like wake up bell goes off, the first one at 5:15, the second one goes off at 5:45. By like 6:15, you have to be inside of the temple, because morning prayer, whatever you want to call it, you know, but morning prayer is going to start, whether that is them literally reading from the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita, or we're doing mantra, or, you know, something else, like, and then it's a long day, and like lights are out at like 9-10 o'clock. That's it. Go to sleep, wake up, do it again tomorrow. Religion gives people these sense of, I have something. There's a podcast episode on the Wolf Mother podcast a long time ago about horizon events. And that means you have something to look forward to. Organized religion gives people something to look forward to. You always have something on the calendar that's going to come up. You're always looking forward to something. It's keeping you more disciplined, you know. For my grandmother, Anne, I mean, that bitch was up at 3 a.m. every single morning doing like an hour or two. I don't know if she was doing the rosary prayer for the whole 2 hours or whatnot, but she was disciplined. It gave her something to do. If you are finding that you are like, oh my God, maybe I'm being called back to Jesus, and I'm not teaching like my fucking boy Jesus, okay? I love Jesus down. I love Yeshua. I think he is incredible. And I think he had some wonderful teachings that I still talk to him. I still pray with him. He's an ascended master that we work with in spirituality. You know, how many people are like, oh my God, like I could feel Jesus, or like I could literally feel like I was sitting with Jesus receiving his teachings during this ayahuasca ceremony or the psilocybin ceremony or during this earth-based ritual, you know? Love that man. It was just that, you know, the church is one of the most incredible cults there has ever been. And they're very financially successful. That's at least one thing. But if you're finding yourself being called to specifically Jesus or organized religion again, I implore you to sit with these things. I implore you to think about, am I really just looking for discipline? And am I just struggling to fucking get myself to be disciplined? If I could wake up at the time that I want to wake up every morning, eat healthy foods or whatever foods I want to fucking eat, and get my movement in, go to the gym, and I was in a book club, and I also painted, and whatever those things that you wanted to do. If you did all of those things, do you feel like you'd be okay? Because then you're probably not actually looking for Jesus in the church. You're just looking for discipline and something to look forward to. Something that religion scares people. I mean, truthfully, I was terrified in the ashram that I had to get my things done when I had to get them done. They're not scary. But there's a level of pressure that they put on you. I was also very young, but there's a level of pressure that they put on you so that you wake up at the right times, you do what you have to do during the day at the right times, you go to sleep at the right times, and the church, also applies a lot of fucking pressure that you show up to there are some people that go to mass every single day. Okay, that's great. If that's the thing that's going to get you to be disciplined, then cool. But I implore you, if you still feel a little bit against organized religion, question that shit. Question that shit. Do I really need the church, or do I just need somebody to hold me accountable? Do I really need the church, or am I just looking to have an actual community that congregates every single weekend? Am I looking to really go back to the church, or am I just looking to be around people who want to sing to the oneness, pray to the oneness, speak about the oneness? I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong for your life. I will love you either way. You want to go back and hang out in the church? Cool. You want to go a completely different way and you want to hang out naked in the woods under the full moon? Also cool. I don't give a shit. Whichever version of you feel like you need to fulfill right now, go fulfill that. I am just offering a different perspective where I have been seeing in private conversations with community members of mine and a few of my clients where I'm like, but again, are you actually looking for that? Or bro, do you just need better community? Do you just actually need a place every single week where you can meet with people and feel like you're raising your own vibration, you're raising the vibration of the planet, you're connecting to the spirit realm in some way, shape, or form? And also, these are people that if shit hit the fan, maybe you could call them and be like, hey, I'm super depressed and I'm having a really tough day. Can I talk to you about it? And can you give me some advice? Really want to implore people to sit with that, because I understand that life can be very overwhelming. And that is why I think having faith of some kind is one of the most incredible things that we can do in this lifetime. So I'm going to take one last deep breath with you guys. I didn't expect to talk for this long. I thought this was going to be a 20-minute episode. I just yapped for a fucking hour. Please leave a comment. If you listen on Spotify and Apple and you don't want to leave a comment there, come on over to YouTube. Leave this, excuse me, on YouTube. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your reflection. Also, if you listen to all of this and you're like, well, I'm not called back to the church in any way, shape, or form, I just wanted to know your story. Share your story with me. Why were you even interested in listening to what my story was? What has your journey been? Are you somebody who I have actually had a similar journey to yours and I just wanted to listen? Or are you I was never raised on religion. My best friend, she's the most beautiful person on this planet. She's made perfectly. She grew up with absolutely no religion. And then when we became friends and I brought her to Staten Island for the first time, we became friends in college. I brought her to Staten Island for the first time. I was like, yo, you got to come to church with me this weekend. She was terrified. She was so scared. And it's so funny that I was talking to her recently and she was saying she told someone else, she was like, oh yeah, if you lose something, you just ask St. Anthony. And the person was like, how do you know about St. Anthony? And she was like, oh, well, I lived on Staten Island for a bit. My best friend was raised Catholic. So share your story with me, and I'm sending so much love to you and to yours. If you see this before October 6th at 6 p.m. EST on Zoom, we're gathering for an inner child healing circle where we're going to be using art as our muse to emote and experience. So I hope you can join us then. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be gathering for Samhain, which is on the Wheel of the Year, which is also Halloween. And we're going to do a wild dance with your ancestors. I fucking love doing this class. And if you join the Wolf Mother Circle tier, of course, it's in the description below. It's $33 for the month, and you get access to both of those classes and all the recordings from the rest of the year. Sending so many blessings to you and to yours. Thank you for being here and for always listening.